Internet users are always told to be careful of what they download online. And this isn't just a generic warning. Most people think that computer viruses are just a relic of the past, annoying bugs that antivirus softwares clean up. To be fair, most of them are these days. However, even in modern times, they can be catastrophic. You probably expected me to follow that up with an ExpressVPN ad. That won't be happening because this is the first video on my channel. I do a wide variety of horror content, scary video essays. Subscribe now if you want to claim OG status. Not to spoil what'll come later in this video, but computer viruses can cause billions of dollars in losses and even contribute to human deaths. I'll be starting with weird, goofy, almost funny examples of malware. I'll even demonstrate some along the way. As the list goes on though, I'll tackle more severe examples. If you don't know much about computer science, I'll simplify some of the terms to make things easier to understand. So with that, let's begin.
Well, hello there!
The first one on this list is BonziBuddy. This is a very well-known one. We'll be testing it out in a minute, but first I want to give you the anime backstory behind this devious, nefarious little purple gorilla. In early versions of Windows, Microsoft Office had different Office assistants. They first appeared in Office 97. They were supposed to be little friends that would pop up to help you type out emails or documents. The default one was Clipit, called Clippy by the general public, which Microsoft eventually adopted. And Microsoft Agent was an adjacent system to this that let you better customize your virtual pal. However, people hated this paperclip more than airline food.
What's the deal with airplane food?
They found him intrusive and annoying. Whenever you'd be typing, he'd pop up to block a chunk of the screen and recommend different ways of writing, some of which made little sense. You'd press no to his suggestion and then he'd just pop up again a minute later. His codename was TFC, and rumor had it that even Microsoft employees referred to him as that f***ing clown because of this.
Go away, you paperclip! No one likes you!
Ultimately, he was removed from later versions of Office by the time Windows XP came around. So a company called Software, known for coming up with ways to send voice messages over email, stepped in and decided to create their own version of a virtual assistant who would actually help. Its release was in 1999. Many downloaded it because, unlike Clippy, Bonzi had some novelty. He would tell jokes, play games with you, read emails out loud. He was regarded as a more helpful mascot. Around that time period, virtual pets were a popular concept, like Tamagotchi. Originally, Software used one of the characters from the Microsoft Agent, Petey the Parrot. Though they randomly decided to change it, it might have been because of copyright, but we're not entirely sure. We don't know how many people downloaded BonziBuddy. Some data suggests nearly 50,000, some estimates have it at 4 million. There isn't a definitive number I could find. Bonzi became relatively popular. He would keep track of events on your calendar, read emails out loud in this weird voice.
Did you know that the most widely sung song in the English-speaking world is Happy Birthday to You?
It had text-to-speech in general, it could play games, give fun facts, and more. It seems fun. I'll demonstrate it in a bit, but first I should tell you that this purple gorilla isn't as innocent as he looks. When using BonziBuddy, you have to input your information, your address, age, all that jazz, and this data would be sold to advertisers. Bonzi would send pop-up ads to your computer. It would even change your browser's homepage to the Bonzi Software website. It was using a backdoor Trojan. In 2002, there was a class action lawsuit against the company, particularly for their own pop-ups. See, Bonzi Software would put up those "your computer has a virus, click here to get rid of it" type ads, and those would urge users to buy some of Bonzi Software's other programs. Bonzi Software was told to change those from being disguised as alerts to being labeled as advertisements. The program was still available, though it would be known to the public as a virus, until 2004 when they faced more legal trouble. Their collection of user data violated the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, or COPPA. You could register your age as being a child without a parent's permission, which is against the law. For this, they were ordered to pay $75,000 in damages. You could even sign up as a baby because this dummy purple gorilla thinks an infant can use the computer. Then again, when I look at YouTube Shorts comments, I can see why.
Boys are Sigma. Boys always cook girls.
This was basically the end for Bonzi Software. But let's test it. Let's put money where our mouths are. See, people have nostalgia for this little guy and have recreated safer versions of him that you can download. So, let's get a virus. Bonzi's no longer an official company, so therefore they have nowhere to send my data to. Okay, so I got this rewritten version here that's supposed to not have any adware or spyware in it. Let's test it out. Oh, there he is. Why is there a blue screen behind him?
Hello there. I don't believe... Nice to meet you, Tom.
Ah! It said my name. That's super weird.
This is the first time we have met. I'd like to tell you a little about myself.
Okay.
I'm your friend and BonziBuddy.
Are you really my friend? You kind of stole people's data, sold it to advertisers. Your adware, spyware. What are you doing?
I'm not already smart.
What did you just do? Ooh, he's juggling coconuts. Cool. Okay, but what can you do? You can speak. Oh, I can make it say what I want.
And remember, Tom, let's keep it clean.
I don't want to keep it clean. How about that? Let's have it whisper seductively. Okay, that was not very seductive. Mr. White, I downloaded this new purple gorilla on the computer. Jesse, that's a virus. Nah, Mr. White, he sings songs and plays games. Okay, I can't do a good Jesse impression. Is it bad that I don't know, like, any of these songs? Other than, I guess, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Let's see you sing.
Okay,
sing for me.
Goes. Twinkle, twinkle, little star.
Okay.
How I wonder what you are.
Screw Miku, dude. This is my favorite Vocaloid right here.
Twinkle, twinkle, little star. How I wonder what you are. When the blazing sun
No, what? There's more lyrics? What?
Let me show your little light. Twinkle, twinkle all the night. Twinkle, twinkle, little star. How I wonder what you are.
I didn't know there was more to this. There's still more.
Thanks you for your tiny spark. He could not see where to go if you did not twinkle so. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are.
Wow. Beautiful. Beautiful.
Here's one my mom used to sing to me. I hope you like it.
Okay.
Tell me the tales that to me were so dear long, long ago. Let me believe that you loved as you loved long ago. Do you remember the path where we met long ago?
I'm not seeing any of the games here, though. That's the thing. Tell me a joke.
Okay,
Entertain me.
the man with 5 legs.
His pants fit him like a glove.
Pants fit him like a glove.
I've heard this one before. What is that smile?
That gets better every time I hear it.
I feel like this would be a good concept for, like, analog horror. Blow a kiss. Oh, I feel so rizzed up right now. I'm about to get oiled up. Give me a hug, you big purple gorilla. Oh, he's hugging himself. Lame. I thought he was gonna jump out of the screen. Oh, he looks cool as ice. I wish I could get rid of this little blue background here, but what can you do? Alright, read me a story. Bonzi and the treasure chest.
Stories. It was early in the morning when Bonzi and Spot set out along the beach to collect seashells.
Oh, this is actually a whole story. Okay, well, I'm not that interested to keep reading, but that's a fun little feature. Tell me a fun fact.
This just in. Did you know that the longest sneezing fit lasted 978 days? Don't worry, Tom.
That can't be.
Where that came from.
That can't be real.
This is a nicer spot anyway.
Wait, that's actually real. Okay, sorry, man. I was unfamiliar with your game.
Hey, Tom.
Yo.
What are you up to?
Not a lot. Not a lot, man. I just downloaded a virus on my computer. I didn't even use a virtual machine because I'm kind of an idiot. Overall, this wasn't extremely harmful, which is why it's first on the list. In fact, it's funny to even imagine collecting children's information and selling your data to advertisers was once punishable by law. Today, though, nobody cares. Social media companies get away with it all the time.
Subscribe to my YouTube channel or else I will install viruses on your computer.
Gene Pickett normally would have opened that message immediately, but he knew about the virus because the base shut down email communications over the weekend.
The next one is way more damaging. It's known as the Melissa virus. When it originally started spreading in March of 1999, they didn't have a name for it. That was given in retrospect and has a really funny origin, but before we get into that, you need to know a little bit about macros. Back in the day, I say that like I was there, computers were pretty primitive. You'd have to copy and paste things an obnoxious amount of times if you, for example, were a teacher and needed to print out a bunch of assignment papers for your students all at once. Or if you worked in insurance and had to print plans for people every day. Macros were coded scripts inside of a document that would let you automatically place things, and they had a bunch of other purposes. Just imagine a little window for coding. In old versions of Microsoft Word, macros automatically activated without permission. The Melissa virus utilized macros to spread. Users would be sent an email from somebody, usually a person who they knew, that got the virus. All it said was, "Here's the document that you asked for, don't show anyone else," with the little emoticon smiley face. The document attached, list.doc, had a bunch of pornography links and passwords. That sort of content was difficult to find back in the day, so people would share things like this a lot. Here's where things go south. The document had code in the macro that caused it to send the same email with the same document attached to the first 50 people in your contacts in Microsoft Outlook. Also, if you open the list.doc on your computer when the exact time corresponded with the date it was sent, then any Word documents you had opened would have this little quote from The Simpsons pasted in it, which you may remember from, I believe, episode 2 of the show.
22 points, plus triple word score, plus 50 points using all my letters. Game's over, I'm out of here.
But that's not important. You can imagine how catastrophic it was for list.doc, a list of porn links, to email itself to 50 people in your contacts. And for every 50 people it spread to, it would spread to 50 more for each of them that opened it. If just half of those first 50 opened the document, that would send to 1,250 people. You can see why it spread extremely fast, infecting over 100,000 machines in just a couple of days. Hell, within hours, entire servers were down because of how much was being actively sent. The network couldn't process that much, especially with how rapid it was. It got to the point where the United States Marines' computer systems were shut down for a long time.
But it in no way hindered our ability to do our operational missions to support the warfighters. What it did do was cause us to go back late Friday and work like we had pre-computer days. We called people, we faxed them, we telephoned them.
They couldn't email each other due to the massive overflow of email traffic. It didn't destroy files or anything like that, but it spread so fast it shut down the internet pretty quickly in a lot of places. Because of all this, Microsoft had to shut down email servers for about 5 hours just to stop the spread. It's estimated that this caused $80 million in cleanup, lost productivity, and system downtime. Of course, they had to trace where this all came from. Though it mostly used Outlook, it also spread through AOL, and because of that, AOL was able to trace the email chains back further and further. They traced specifically that email header and found the perpetrator, a man in New Jersey named David L. Smith. David had originally posted the document as alt.sex for downloading on an internet news group on AOL. Internet news groups were basically like public forums, so anyone could download it from there, and that's where it started. Upon investigation, they had found that David named it Melissa in code after a stripper he met at a club in Florida. I can't imagine how that conversation went. Like, damn girl, you give me a lap dance, I'll start a computer virus for you. Like, what? Was this how you picked up chicks in the 90s? I mean, hey man, if a girl offered to make a virus after me, that'd be kinda hot, just saying. I think I'd fall for them. Could this be the new method? I don't know, what are your thoughts on this? The FBI had traced the virus to David after only 6 days, who said that it was all just a joke. He didn't intend for it to cause as much harm as it did. He pleaded guilty to fraud among other cyber criminal charges and was sentenced to 20 months in prison. He had to pay a $5,000 fine too. After getting out, he was on probation, supervised release for some time. Again, not a super serious one. They updated Word to make it not automatically open macros, and thus the virus was contained. Okay, so last minute edit to this video, I actually found a video from 2019 made by somebody claiming to be the titular Melissa that the virus was named after. Take a listen.
So we really connected. I don't even remember doing a lap dance for him at the time. I could have, but honestly, I don't remember. And he looked over at me and he said, I am going to create a virus and I'm going to name it after you. And I was like, you know, like, I didn't know much about viruses at the time at all. I didn't really believe him, because that's cheesy all in itself. And so he said, but I'm gonna name it after you. And then all of a sudden, I see this virus was created. It was named after an exotic dancer in Miami. And I was like, holy shit, that was me. Oh my god, this guy was like literally for real.
Obviously, just as anything you see on the internet, this should be taken with a grain of salt. All of this is unverifiable, but it is very funny to think about. I was just improvising on the whole lap dance part and the, hey girl, I'm gonna name a virus after you thing. I had recorded that before I came across this. I didn't think that's actually how it went, but I don't know, man, who knows? The next virus is personal to me because I actually got this on my laptop one time because I am an idiot. This would be the YouAreAnIdiot virus. It was hosted on a joke prank website called YouDon'tKnowWhoIam.org, which appeared in November of 2002, though some internet historians debate over whether it appeared in advertisements on adult websites even earlier than that. YouAreAnIdiot used JavaScript and Adobe Flash Player to activate itself upon being clicked on. When you click the URL, you get this little animation of smiley faces blinking black and white, singing that you are an idiot. You are an idiot!
idiot. You are an idiot.
I'm not an idiot, I'm a moron. There's a big difference. Kind of a janky nothing burger at first until you try to leave the page. As soon as this happens, users get a bunch of pop-ups on their computer. The pop-up tabs bounce around wildly, trying to close them just creates more. Pressing Ctrl F4 to close tabs would just create another pop-up calling you an idiot. Ultimately, it just ends up crashing your computer because you have so many active tabs. It's just annoying and slightly jarring when you can't close it because you have to restart, and you might not have had documents or projects saved. When I got this on my computer as a child, it was a bit weird, but upon turning my laptop off and then on again, it went away. There are likely versions of this out there that are more malicious, though the main one is not really that harmful. They have a version of it on Chrome that you can search up, and we're gonna test it out, revisit my childhood trauma. Alright, time to revisit this. Not hearing anything so far. Oh, there it is! What the hell? Oh, jeez! Oh, man! Look at all of this! Look at it! Just observe the mess here. Oh no. Oh no, things are crashing. No, do not restore pages. Well, that was not nearly as bad as I thought it would be. Apparently, I have not learned my lesson. I am still an idiot.
David, this is far from a childhood prank anymore. Experts say that the I Love You virus could end up costing the world economy $10 billion in lost work time.
The next virus I'm discussing is not as lighthearted or fun as the previous ones. This one has both malice and ideology behind it, and of course that is the I Love You virus. Developed in the Philippines, this one worked in a similar way to Melissa. It emailed itself to a bunch of people in your contacts. It preyed on users' curiosity, presenting itself as a love letter. The email would read, "Kindly check the attached love letter coming from me," with a document called LoveLetterForYou.txt. It was sent as a virtual basic script, or VBS file, but in the then newly released Windows 2000, file extension names were not visible by default. The file itself deceivingly uses .txt in the name so that users think it's a text file. Unlike Melissa, however, it didn't just send to 50 people in your contacts, it sent itself to everyone. The day it hit was May 4th, 2000. May the 4th be with you. Aside from YouAreAnIdiot, why did all these viruses originate in the springtime? I mean, you see that later on this list, spring and summer. With no vacations or holidays around, I guess that's just prime time to make some malware. Anyway, the virus once downloaded would change your homepage on your default browser, presumably Internet Explorer, to download Trojan horse files that then infect your PC. It then erases certain files on your computer. MP3 files were just hidden, but pictures, documents, videos, and mostly everything else would be overwritten with the virus's own code. That caused a lot of permanent damage. Many of these files were permanently gone. The virus itself was so intelligent that it would create a database of who it was sent to make sure that the same person wouldn't receive it twice. It also stole password and user data, sending it to servers in the Philippines, which is how investigators found out where it came from. Within only a few days, they had reports of it infecting 50 million computers. It got to the point where 10% of all PCs had it. Now, as sophisticated as it sounds, the I Love You virus wasn't all that original. It was clearly made using pieces of other viruses like Melissa. The code is seen as simplistic and makes tweaks to various other malware which were used to program it. The National Bureau of Investigation in the Philippines, similar to the American FBI, traced it to two men, Onel de Guzman and Rionel Ramones. Now, Ramones was not really responsible at all. You can forget he exists. He just happened to share an apartment with Guzman, and they shared devices. He was the one initially arrested, though he was released shortly after. Guzman is the real villain of this anime here. Now, the big question is, why did Onel de Guzman do this? For ideological reasons. He strongly believed that internet access should be expanded to the point of being free. Guzman pointed out in his college thesis that it provides immeasurable education to everyone. He himself loved the internet but was struggling financially. Usually in a thesis, you perform some kind of test or experiment, or you propose one. It's believed that his proposition was to make a virus that stole Wi-Fi passwords to get free access. However, the college rejected his proposal, calling it illegal and unethical. Right after that is when he dropped out and made the virus. Personally, I think he had spite when constructing it as well. After all, it does more than just steal password data. It erases and destroys files, costing somewhere from $5 to $10 billion in damages. along with 10 to 15 billion from the US just to remove it. It ended up getting a branch of British Parliament shut down after only a few hours. It also hit banking systems in Belgium. Guzman had tried to hide the evidence, but enough of it was traced to him. He was charged with various crimes related to cyber fraud. Unfortunately, cyber crimes weren't really well developed, as the internet was still pretty new in the year 2000. That July, during the case, the Philippines then created the e-commerce law, but their constitution prevents people from being charged under a newly created law when the crime was committed before the law's implementation. Therefore, he got away with it. In interviews from back then, he denied it, said that he didn't care, and tried to play it off. In May of 2020, during springtime, as always for some reason, journalist Geoff White located Guzman working at a cell phone store in Manila, which is where he was from. He admitted to making it just to steal passwords, though he's never answered as to why it destroyed files. So in the end, 10% of computers in 2000 were infected, billions of dollars worth of data permanently erased, and the creator of the virus got off scot-free with no legal punishment. Internet safety was standard back in the 2000s and even the 2010s. You were often told not to give people your real name or any information about you, and not talk to strangers. Now, nobody really cares about that privacy anymore. It seems like everyone just wants to burn out your retinas with everything in their life constantly, though there was a time when privacy was considered sacred, and the next virus, Sub7, invaded it in frightening ways. It wasn't the first software that did this sort of thing. There was a program that had emerged just beforehand called Back Orifice. Back Orifice was released by a hacker group called Cult of the Dead Cow. They started in the 80s and are known for perpetuating political messages and commentary through shock art. They did what could probably be considered trolling, from claiming that they gave Ronald Reagan dementia to waging war against Scientology. This group seems a little nuts. Really, their strategy was attention grabbing. In 1998, they hosted their hacker convention, DEF CON 6, not to be confused with the military definition of DEF CON. At the convention, they released Back Orifice, a software that lets users remotely control another device. It was the original RAT, remote administration tool. You could execute commands, browse files, and generally peep inside someone else's computer. Cult of the Dead Cow released this as a statement piece to show how insecure Windows systems actually were. So cut to 6 months later, February 1999, finally not spring, kind of in winter. A Romanian hacker named Mobman created Sub7 and spread it through various internet chat rooms and forums. We don't have a confirmed first instance of its appearance. Sub7 didn't send itself though. It was used by individuals who would get users to download it by sending it through certain things intentionally. For example, someone would take a paid video game, make a free version, put the virus inside of the game, and let people come download the game for free. This was also done with images and many other files, because what Sub7 did was allow you to access another person's computer remotely, just like Back Orifice. In fact, it uses a lot of the same code. However, like an M. Night Shyamalan movie, there's a nasty twist. Sub7 allowed people to not just access data, but also viewing anything on the infected user's screen. They could remotely control the person's mouse. It kept a keylogger which tracks any key that's been clicked, so you could steal passwords. You could hijack keyboards and mices. But the worst part is that you could listen to the other user's microphone and watch them through their webcam, even if they didn't consent to it. Whereas Back Orifice was oriented for computer nerds, Sub7 had a more easy user layout. It was even believed at one point that Sub7 was used by teenagers to spy on each other creepily. It's like that scene in American Pie when Jim is on a webcam and every dude in his school watches him go prematurely with the girl. I know that in the movie it was more like him sending an email link to everyone on accident, but this is just to give you an idea of what it's like to have this virus. People looking through your webcam without consent. And that's scary. Many accounts surfacing today from people who previously used Sub7 recall pranking users with it by opening their disk drives repeatedly, printing things from their computer, changing their desktop backgrounds to obscene imagery, and things like that. Plenty of files could have been deleted and people were spied on through webcams, and that alone is a terrifying concept. Luckily, antivirus softwares developed enough to catch things like this, but Sub7 would continue to receive updates and get remade by random people over the years, though not as an actual usable software, at this point it's seen as more of a historical artifact of old programming. Remote access Trojans are easily seen and blocked by most systems nowadays, so they're not very common anymore. The creator, however, is still a mystery. In 2013, the Rolling Stone interviewed someone claiming to be the infamous mob man behind Sub7, a guy called Gregory Hanis. But then later, in October of 2024, a Romanian Canadian came forward on Darknet Diaries claiming to be the real mob man. They pointed out inconsistencies in the American story on Rolling Stone. No one knows for sure, but all accounts suggest that Sub7 was a research project, more so made to test the limits with what was possible in computer coding.
Now in play and completely undetected, it caused the centrifuges to spin so fast that they eventually began to shatter under the pressure.
The claims are startling, a detailed description of how US and other intelligence agencies planted computer viruses, bugs, even explosives in nuclear equipment destined for Iran.
Stuxnet is a difficult virus to talk about because much of the information surrounding it is not officially confirmed, some of it's up in the air. The virus was discovered in June of 2010, and all information about its origin have been through tracing its code. We start with America and Iran's historically rocky past. After 9/11, the US government grew very concerned with the entire Middle Eastern region. Though Iran offered support in the aftermath of 9/11, the Bush administration would still go on to consider them a part of the generalized axis of evil, and that phrase was used to describe the growing powers in the Middle East and even North Korea that could pose possible threats. If you recall, that's what Dick Cheney's speeches of weapons of mass destruction were all about. 2005 is suspected to be when the government of the United States and Israel started having computer experts cook up a virus that would cripple Iran's nuclear program. It was apparently called Project Olympic Games. Neither country claims responsibility though, and it's still up in the air as to how much involvement each party had. At this time, Iran was just setting up its uranium enrichment facility. Big facilities like this use different kinds of technologies, like PLCs, programmable logic controllers. They're responsible for electromechanical commands, the same things that run claw machines, something that's digitally controlled but works physically. The main target, the Natanz uranium enrichment facility, used an air-gapped network. This means that while computers had access to each other, none of them were connected to the broader internet. Military facilities and nuclear sites today practice the same thing for this reason. They don't want any chance of foreign invasion digitally. Therefore, it's believed that the US must have used intelligence operations to have people go in secretly and analyze their systems. It took years of planning, strategizing, and having spies memorize their softwares to fully create what would later be called Stuxnet. It was used in 2007, though likely as a test run, as it wouldn't become publicly known until 3 years later. As for its design, there are multiple layers. It can be considered a Trojan, worm, rootkit, among other things, because of the way it operates. Its delivery system uses fraudulent certificates and code to seem legit to antivirus softwares in the computer itself. It uses rootkit to hide itself inside of different files. A rootkit, by the way, is a collected system of malware that disguises itself as to not be recognized or seen by internal scans at all. The type of PLCs it specifically looked for were Siemens by Somatic, the machines used at the facility at the time. It would then mess with the systems, like causing mechanical parts to move extremely fast or extremely slow at times suddenly. They would break or wear out machines in the facility intentionally. But the readings coming back would always make it seem like everything was fine. For a lot of engineers who didn't know better, they thought what they were seeing was normal. It caused all of the readings and tests to come back with positive results, even though it was breaking down the machines. Privately, it caused a lot of collateral damage. Many of the centrifuges, which are spinning devices made for separating types of uranium, were destroyed. It's estimated to be 1,000 out of 5,000 of them. Because of the false positives, it took very long for engineers to detect anything was even going on. Combined with the damage, this set their nuclear program back likely years, and probably cost tens of millions of dollars with machine replacement. It was later revealed that 30,000 computers were infected across many nuclear agencies in Iran. Iranian officials have said before that their nuclear scientists have been killed or targeted. Most likely assassinations and car bombs, but the machines suddenly moving at rapid speeds could theoretically have been responsible for some deaths, which occurred in the nuclear program. But that's just speculative, there's no confirmed kills from it. Though it was mainly used in air-gapped networks, updates designed it to spread itself through zero-day exploits, which are effectively blind spots in a computer's database. Therefore, the virus ended up escaping out into the wild by accident. It was first discovered in the wild by a cybersecurity company called Virus Blockada in June of 2010. At first, they called it rootkit.tmp hider. A cybersecurity organization called Symantec coined the name W32temp-HID, but then later changed it to W32 Stuxnet. This derived from names of certain codes in the virus. Fortunately, it didn't really do that much to the average person's computer. Unless you were a nuclear operator, you could download it on your computer and it wouldn't do anything, as it only targets those specific systems used in Iran facilities. The US tried to use Stuxnet to infect North Korea's nuclear program, but they never could, as North Korea is extremely secretive and nearly impossible for agents to infiltrate that deeply, let alone their nuclear program. Different variants of Stuxnet would release and target computers in Iran throughout the years, some of them used for stealing information and harming other systems in place. Iran eventually did declare somewhat of a cyber war, not officially. They just tried to retaliate with Operation Ababil in 2012. This was their response, basically a bunch of DDoS attacks where you overload servers with a bunch of fake users and bots, fake activity. They did this with banks across the US and ended up costing millions in rebuilt systems and bot removal. In 2016, the DOJ arrested some individuals involved in that. Overall, this is less scary for the average computer user, but being able to manipulate electromechanical systems is a pretty jarring concept in my opinion.
Atlanta is in recovery mode following one of the worst cyber attacks ever against a U.S. city.
March 22nd, 2018. What could have just been another quiet day in Atlanta would soon become much more, as SamSam Ransomware would plague the city's institutions. An audit earlier that year found many vulnerabilities in the city government's computer systems. That's how the SamSam group knew to target them, with what would be known as the SamSam virus. There's an entire presentation on this virus done by Andrew Brandt, or Sophos, which provides good context and information about the virus itself, like how it behaves. SamSam is ransomware. Ransomware is a type of malware that infects your computer and locks you out of most functions, or steals or encrypts your data and holds it all for ransom. There's usually a pop-up requesting a big payment to go along with it. They basically hold your computer for ransom. Some types of malware actually grant you your computer and files back once you pay, but plenty of them never do. Most of this is done through phishing links. That's phishing with a PH. It's where you send somebody a fraudulent email requesting information. Usually it's the occasional email you get from Amazon saying that they need to verify your info. Sometimes they can make an email look like a real Amazon email, though that's a bit rare. Usually it's something like PayPal@gmail.com, but the L is a capital I, and they just hope that you won't notice. However, SamSam was not done through phishing. It uses what's called brute force attacks. This is when a system automatically guesses passwords repeatedly until one of them is right. It then starts to encrypt files to hold for ransom. Usually viruses like these attack big companies where files are absolutely needed, big corporations or organizations. They can attack ordinary people though. It happens less frequently because a person can simply get a new phone having lost some photos on their device. Places like hospitals, on the other hand, require patient info, documented appointments for surgeries, and other things. Hackers also know that big companies are willing to pay more money than the average Joe. Cities are a viable target because many of them have underfunded agencies that use primitive technology. A lot of courts, public officials, and even government agencies still use Windows XP. Many of their computers have backdoors left open where they're not fully up to date with the newest Windows versions. Administrative computers at a place of work usually have control over most or all other devices in the network. To do this, the admin computers don't necessarily need internet, but most use the internet for convenience because it's an easier mode of wireless control over other PCs on the network. Because the internet is accessible to anyone everywhere, these pathways are often not too difficult for hackers to find. Other than password guessing, much of this was done manually. Once the hackers were on the administrative computers, they could access information regarding other networks within the government databases and control computers within those departments. The first known trace of SamSam was in late 2016. It's believed that there were two versions predating the main 2018 attacks where certain aspects of codes were being tested. Unlike most ransomware, SamSam would even hold internal data that allowed allows the machine to actually function. What they charged back then was about 6 bitcoins, which is much higher than the average scammer. At that time, one coin would have been exactly $8,993. So each scam costed over 50 grand. Most scammers use cryptocurrency because it's very difficult, nearly impossible to trace. If I were to scam someone, they better pay me in Hawk-Tua coin. In their main attack on the city government in Atlanta in March of 2018, they first requested about $51,000 from the city. The city famously refused to pay. The attack spread to various devices all over their institutions and was first noticed at 5 a.m. on March 22nd. Emails from IT departments told people to shut off computers before the ransomware could automatically reach them. SamSam spread automatically rather than randomly, though many of its ransom messages were actually unique to specific targets. The police department couldn't use their machines for a day. They had to use pens and paper. Only a few agencies were not affected. Many Atlanta residents couldn't pay their bills. It hit their legal offices, medical, manufacturing, transportation, education, and many other industries. Medical is a really jarring one in particular because this delays operations like surgeries. Other places were hit right up before this, but they were smaller towns and nothing to this scale. While many towns paid, the Department of Justice put out a statement warning that paying doesn't actually work most times. Most computers infected with SamSam actually did lose their files permanently. Only a few were able to recover. SamSam would later spread to other big cities and the cyber attack grew in scale. It mostly attacked English-speaking nations. The FBI investigated and found 2 main hackers responsible, Faramars Shahi Savandi and Mohammed Mehdi Shah Mansouri. I would say sorry if I butchered your name, but these nipple twisters did quite a lot of damage, so I'll withhold. All we know is that they're Iranian, so the DOJ couldn't prosecute them. Their motives seemed purely financial and not ideological. Some speculate the Iranian government may have been involved, but those are unconfirmed suspicions. Many cyber attackers brag about their work on dark web forums, which comes back to nip them in the bud. These guys never did. By the end of 2018, the SamSam group had made away with an estimated $6 million and caused upwards of $30 million in damages worldwide that year. It was first reported that the city of Atlanta spent $2.7 million on recovery. However, they ended up requesting more money that possibly totaled out to $17 million. The government did eventually start looking into abilities to trace crypto, so once that happened and the attackers were named publicly, the SamSam group stopped known operations. It's possible that the hackers are still out there and behind other cybercrimes. We can never know for sure. Luckily, the meat of their attack ended after 2018.
The malware encrypted and rendered useless hundreds of thousands of computers in hospitals, schools, businesses, and...
Please turn off your devices before WannaCry ransomware can infect your local...
The next virus is pretty well known and hit on a global level. It's got a lot of characters and lore, and that would be the WannaCry virus. This one was so complex that some of the information on how it works is somewhat withheld. It's largely an amalgamation of 2 extraordinarily powerful tools. One of them is Eternal Blue and the other is Double Pulsar. The National Security Agency in America has countless digital tools for hacking. Eternal Blue is a very elite one at their disposal. Many versions of Windows use the SMB v1 service, which listened for communication and accepted data. This would usually take place between itself, networks, printers, and other external devices. However, there were a few very small parts of it which didn't actually verify what signals were coming in. So an NSA agent could essentially lie to your computer and input program codes into your kernel. The kernel is basically like the backbone of your PC. Other hackers hadn't found this out because experimenting with the kernel is very volatile, and the exact loopholes the NSA found were buried so deep within millions of layers of code. It is possible that hackers could have found some of these exploits, but the NSA got a hold of them first and made a tool to probe people's computers. This was called Eternal Blue. The NSA never told Windows about these vulnerabilities. They kept it a secret. I don't know why Microsoft didn't sue for that, but whatever. The other tool, Double Pulsar, would then act inside one's computer after Eternal Blue had already gotten inside of the system. Double Pulsar would create other backdoors and be used to actually type and execute commands inside of someone's kernel. See it as Eternal Blue being what kicks down your door or picks your lock, and Double Pulsar being what enters and does business. These tools were made by the Equation Group, which is a group of elite hackers that allegedly work for the NSA. I mean, say what you want, it's basically confirmed. However, another group of elite hackers would enter the mix, the Shadow Brokers. Sounds like a villainous anime team. In August of 2016, the Shadow Brokers hacked the Equation Group and stole both of these tools and more. In October, they tried to auction these programs off. They got no buyers though. Many were skeptical as to whether or not the group were even even in possession of those things. In April of 2017, the shadow brokers revealed more information about their leaks, and pretty much just gave all those tools away, and loads of other information about the NSA. They did so in protest to Trump's drone strikes against Syria. The government tried to shut down the leaks, but it was open season for hackers to come and find and take those files and software for free. On May 8th of 2017, RiskSense posted more information on how Eternal Blue worked, somewhat in an effort for the public to recognize it and maybe counter it, I think. Kind of a bad idea because they included the methods of activating Eternal Blue, which was taken advantage of, as the WannaCry virus would be released on May 12th. And who created it? A programmer by the name of Park Jin-hyuk, a member of the Lazarus Group, North Korea's official agency for things like hacking. He frequently traveled to China, and it's possible that he made the virus there given some forensic data. The virus hit Asia almost instantly, infecting hundreds of thousands of computers. The worm would automatically spread, and similarly to SamSam, would hold people's data for hostage for $600 to be paid in cryptocurrency. Here is YouTube user 5 Minutes Review testing it on what's probably a virtual machine. This is the message that would come up on everyone's device, and it would give you an explanation that your files would be encrypted and that you have to pay to get them back. You couldn't use your computer until you did that, and this worm spread fast. It needed zero human interaction. It would travel from network to network on its own, infecting every machine that it could. If you pressed the Contact Us button, it went to a Tor page that didn't do anything. Those who paid would receive a decryption key that didn't work. It hit so many hospitals in the UK that ambulances couldn't even use virtual GPS systems. The National Health Service in England estimates its damages got 19,000 medical appointments cancelled and cost just the health industry $92 million. Countless systems from Asia to Europe were having to use old school methods, like what SamSam did to Atlanta, but happening to hundreds of thousands of machines on a broader scale, instead of only a manually selected few. Estimates suggest that it hit 200,000 to 300,000 computers, spanning across 150 countries total. It was named WannaCry because that line seemed to appear in the code as the set of commands.
Look at little Goblin Jr. Gonna cry?
So enter the protagonist of this anime, Marcus Hutchins, a programmer from England. His backstory is pretty interesting in itself. He'd been making and selling malware professionally even as a kid. He would go in and reverse engineer viruses and talk about them in blogs. While on vacation, he was contacted by the UK's National Cybersecurity Centre and sent a copy of the virus. He decided to look into its code. He kept finding one address that popped up everywhere. This string of numbers and letters it sent data to. This address led to a website that had not been claimed yet. So Marcus bought the domain, and that was basically it. The virus was built very wonky. It would check in with that domain and ask, is this an existing website? And if yes, it would stop. If no, it would keep spreading. It was an empty domain, so therefore it kept spreading. As soon as the domain was claimed, it stopped. Though no one got their files back, almost every computer infected permanently lost data. It cost a likely $4 billion in lost productivity and recovery. In ransom money, they only made an estimated $140,000. Yeah, not very well organized. Microsoft would then be made aware of the backdoors that Eternal Blue and Double Pulsar used. They subsequently released updates that patched these later in May. Though it took users a long time to update their computers, most governments came to the same conclusion that North Korea perpetrated this attack, and the FBI put out a warrant for Park Jin-hyuk. However, he's never been found. The motive is believed to be part of the feud between North Korea and the Western world. Hacking is actually one of the few means North Korea has of financially supporting its people. With their rigid structure and dry economy, given that they have minimal trade deals, they make most of their money through illegal weapon sales, meth, fake currency, and hacking. Interestingly enough, Marcus Hutchins would be arrested in 2018 for creating a banking Trojan called Kronos. He was detained at DEF CON in Las Vegas, the place mentioned earlier where Back Orifice was introduced. He had 6 hacking-related charges, but the judge in 2019 ruled that his contribution to stopping WannaCry outweighed the harm he had caused. Therefore, he got off with a very lenient sentence, only 1 year of supervised release before he was let back into the UK. I guess he's less of the hero of the story, more so the anti-hero, whatever.
This spread around the world and cost $10 billion, by far the biggest cyber attack in history.
The next one is very similar to the previous entry, WannaCry, though NotPetya was more structured, better organized, and carried out with intent. Rather than North Korea letting out a poorly built digital monster, this was a downright evil attack from Russia. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation, or GRU because that name is way too long, is an intelligence agency that's existed for about a century. In the modern day, there wasn't much use for them until they developed Sandworm, presumably in the 2000s, which is their own elite group of hackers using the most powerful people they could find. They carried out a few sophisticated malware operations with earlier viruses, some of them being earlier versions of Petya, named after a Soviet weapon from a James Bond movie. This whole group is full of dorks who named a lot of commands and code after things from Dune. Dorks are to be expected in the world of computer science, though. One of Sandworm's biggest attacks was on the Ukrainian power grids. It caused massive power outages and affected over 200,000 people in 2016. The original versions of Petya were genuine ransomware, the basic pay me to get your files back system, but then in 2017 they developed NotPetya, releasing it into Ukraine on June 27th, the night before National Constitution Day in the country. It was likely just as politically motivated as all of Russia's attacks on Ukraine, which never seemed to end. NotPetya used the aforementioned Eternal Blue to get through one's computer using the same methods, though it also used another tool, Mimikatz. This tool was made by French programmer Benjamin Delpy, who saw that a machine's LSASS system, which has access to the kernel, could decrypt passwords based on deep data within, so to speak. Benjamin tried to bring this to the attention of Microsoft in 2011, but they didn't seem all too interested. He developed a tool that could use that exploit to crack passwords called Mimikatz, French slang for cute cats. He released it as a closed source software on GitHub that year. He spoke about it at a Russian conference in 2012. Upon returning to his hotel room, someone else was there, claiming to be in the wrong room by mistake, but they were on his laptop. Later during the conference, a suspicious man approached him and demanded a flash drive with the presentation and the password cracking software. Terrified, Benjamin gave it to him. He then released the source codes for it on GitHub as a last-ditch effort to make sure people knew about the software and could maybe prevent it. So NotPetya used Mimikatz and Eternal Blue. The thing Sandworm used to their advantage most was MEDOC. This was the program that almost the entirety of Ukraine used to file taxes. This was one pathway that interconnected most of the country digitally, so Sandworm utilized this as a means of spreading the worm. The system was supposed to update that day, so they were able to attach NotPetya into the update on MEDOC, so a large number of offices across Ukraine received it. This would go inside the operating system and even hold down the machine's ability to do anything. It would lock the master boot system. That's the very system in the kernel that lets you turn your PC off and on. It spread wildly through not just Ukraine, but other places in Europe and even a little bit in the US. It would go inside the computer, start encrypting files in front of you, reboot, and then display this message here. 80% of its infections were in Ukraine, with an estimated 10% of the computers in the country wiped completely. Whereas computers with WannaCry could have a factory reset and the hardware was still usable, Petya bricked your system, permanently destroying your computer. There was almost no recoverability. 1 out of every 10 computers in the country were destroyed. Much of Ukraine was obviously severely impacted, with airports, hospitals, transportation, and many other companies or industries having to replace their machines while disconnecting from networks to lay low, so to speak. Worldwide, the US government believes it cost $10 billion in damages, doubling the amounts done by WannaCry. That's likely on the low end too. There are countless photos of devices all over Ukraine not working, like ATM machines. MEDOC was raided by the Ukrainian government and their hard drives were taken for analysis. For some reason, there were occasional computers within various networks that were safe from attacks. Israeli computer expert Amit Serper reverse engineered the virus's code and found that it would look for a file called perfc to keep spreading. If a computer had it, then NotPetya would not infect it. If a computer did not have it, then it would be infected. People quickly tried putting that file on their computers. We're still not sure why that kill switch was built in. It must have been so the attackers could grant themselves immunity, all having that oddly specific file name on their own desktop. The next virus is what's considered a logic bomb, which is more terrifying than ordinary malware, because it waits dormant, mostly invisible in your machine for a trigger, and that trigger could be anything: a date, the deletion of a file, just about any move. The virus was first discovered in April of 1998, though at the time nobody knew how deep it actually was. To many it seemed like just another sneaky malware bug, so they would try to remove it. However, they didn't know how deep in the root it would go. This virus wasn't very sophisticated, it was only 1 to 3 kilobytes, so it snuck in through through portable executable files. Those are files that your computer uses to run commands that kind of make it function, like .exe, .system, or .del. Within those files, there's sometimes space for just one tiny kilobyte to sneak its way through. From there, it would go into the master boot system and into as many executable files as it could find. Executable files happen to get transferred around a lot, so this is how it spread. Shareware, media, floppy disks, even downloadable softwares. It rooted itself into all executable files, so people trying to sell games or software and had the bug accidentally uploaded the virus inside whatever they were selling. In July 1998, Activision published first-person shooter game Sin, which had the virus on it. It had ample time to spread before its first attack. Nobody knew it was even there until April 26, 1999 when it struck, the same date as the Chernobyl disaster back in 1986. That day, millions of computers were completely killed. Not just encrypted files or whatever, they were completely bricked and rendered unusable. Not all, but most. Unlike previous entries, this wasn't just in the hundreds of thousands range. This hit the millions and then the 10 millions. Estimates have it at 60 million computers infected, mostly across Asia. The virus in code was officially called CIH. It would go in and rewrite just a small amount of the computer's code to all be zeros, and that would be it, blue screen of death. Because this was 1999, societies were not as dependent on computers yet, though South Korea claimed it infected vital machines used by government officials. The financial toll was at first an estimated $40 million US. South Korea, on the higher end, estimated $250 million in damages. Worldwide, it could have been as high as $1 billion total. Because the virus was so small and contained little to no data, they didn't really trace the creator. All they had was CIH. The creator of CIH, Chang-Ing Hao, came forward and admitted to it. The CIH in it was based on his initials. He was a student at the Tatung University in Taiwan. He apparently made it to challenge antivirus software developers. It's like a light Yagami looking for his L out there, I guess. He and another student by the name of Wangshi Hao authored an antivirus program and released it to the public that could kill the CIH virus. He wasn't arrested because, as I mentioned earlier, cybercrimes were still not developed in the late 90s, and no one came forward with a lawsuit. Taiwan after this did legislate against cybercrimes, but obviously you can't prosecute someone under a new law, in most countries that is. And remember our favorite place, DEF CON, where Back Orifice was introduced? And where Marcus Hutchins was arrested? They were showing off another version of Back Orifice at DEF CON 7 in July of 1999, when it turned out that that was infected with the Chernobyl virus. By this point, however, it didn't matter. CIH only attacked systems in the Windows 9X family, like Windows 95, 98, and ME. Microsoft had just started a new line of operating systems coded differently, the Windows NT family. This group ranges from Windows XP all the way to Windows 11, and as the world moved on to Windows XP, the CIH virus largely became obsolete.
You know, I might actually write your name in my death note and kill you, just like that.
They're now saying they've identified a specific malware program as a culprit.
It's perfect how I just mentioned Light Yagami earlier, because this next one is called the Ryuk virus. Other ransomware systems I've previously mentioned likely have deaths associated with them. In cases where medical facilities don't have access to computers, appointments or emergency services are severely tampered with. That could have contributed to some losses of life, but this is the first one that actually has a documented death which it contributed directly to. This is the last example of ransomware on my list. Rather than Eternal Blue and NSA grade work, this virus uses botnet, a system that basically goes in and renders people's entire systems into bots, like servers or entire computers, which then work for whoever deployed them. One single bot master, as they're called, could control hundreds or even millions of systems at a time. Ryuk was deployed via email phishing scams. It would send documents fraudulently like fake legal papers. When opened, some settings to open documents would open those nifty little macros we mentioned earlier automatically, and there the macro would download a loading software for deploying bots. It would sit for weeks to months at a time memorizing the systems before the bot master would suddenly choose to strike. It would slowly destroy your antivirus software over time, writing the name of your antivirus software in its death note. Okay, I'll stop with these jokes. This was done manually rather than automatically, so it didn't hit millions of machines the way that others like NotPetya did. This is similar to how SamSam did these things, manually infecting profitable places. Ryuk was nastier though. It deliberately chose hospitals and schools to target, not exclusively but primarily so. There were ways of getting back data from other infections like system restore, which can, in some cases, return a computer to its former state, rewinding time. But Ryuk compromised that. It encrypted every single shadow file or backup file and would lock you out of most functions. Only one document would be accessible, and it would be personalized to each organization. The scammers would typically use this document to ask for hundreds of thousands of dollars via Bitcoin, sometimes even millions. Whereas some scams tried to make this seem like some kind of error, Ryuk made itself known with the note "No system is safe" on every document. It was first noticed in 2018. Officials initially thought it was North Korea, but then clarified it was likely Russian criminal cartel groups. It began striking in 2018 and 2019, but primarily hit hard in 2020. It infected the LA Times headquarters, the Baltimore school district, and plenty of hospitals. It struck multiple cities' education systems and many institutions. Unfortunately, many people paid. Plenty of times these hackers actually did grant decryption. Victims described the group as being motivated by purely money. By the end of 2020, they made off with an estimated $150 million. Governments from the US to the UK to the Netherlands to Germany and Ukraine all tracked down bank records and Bitcoin wallets to find the hackers responsible. Eventually, many members of the Ryuk group were apprehended or arrested, some being extradited to other countries to face utmost severe punishments. Obviously, the name Ryuk was taken from the anime and manga Death Note, which I already made way too many references to. Which also doesn't make sense because Ryuk is mostly a neutral character. He would never do anything even remotely close to this. The saddest part is that when Ryuk infected the computers at a hospital in Dusseldorf, Germany, they had trouble delivering emergency care services. The ransom notes on the hospital's machines were addressed to a nearby college, Heinrich Heine University. Administrators got a hold of the hackers to tell them that they were a hospital rather than the university. The hackers then pulled away and sent a decryption key. I don't know why they drew the line there and stopped when they had attacked multiple other hospitals before this without any guilt. Because of this delay in services, a woman who suffered from a life-threatening condition was transferred to the wrong hospital. She passed away on September 17th, 2020. So while editing this video, I found another tragic case of death caused by the ransomware. In July of 2019, Spring Hill Medical Center in Mobile, Alabama was infected with Ryuk. A woman named Tiriani Kid who needed to give birth went there and was not informed of the cyber attack. The hospitals had trouble detecting fetal heartbeat or signs of poor oxygen flow, so when they delivered her baby, they didn't realize the umbilical cord was wrapped around its neck. This can happen during childbirth and sometimes leads to brain damage due to a restriction of oxygen flow at the most vital point which it's needed. The baby, Nico Solar, lived in somewhat of a debilitating condition, needing feeding tubes and constant medical care just to survive. However, she sadly passed away 9 months after her birth due to the sustained brain injuries. I would just like to highlight how serious this is. Up to this point, the topic may have been a little bit dramatized, but computer viruses can kill. They can ruin lives, and they can take lives, which is why it's extremely important to be careful of what you download, no matter what your job is or where you are.
If you think you're the one controlling your phone, think again.
You can bypass your phone's security and install spyware that grants complete access to your device.
This is everywhere. This is an industry that should not exist.
You will die in 3 days.
And here's the final virus on this list. Technically not virus, still malware though, or more specifically spyware. Hell, technically half of the things on this list are not actually viruses. By definition, a virus has to have the ability to self-replicate. Virus was just a more clickable title than malware. Anyway, what I consider to be the scariest example of malware is Pegasus. This is the first instance of malware in this video that actually infected Apple systems as much as Android or Windows. iOS, Apple's operating system, is extremely proprietary and far less open. They have extremely specific standards for what passes through their systems. Windows is like a wooden house that's prone to termites, fires, and natural disasters. iOS, as much as I dislike it, is admittedly stronger. It's more like a sturdy stone castle that can't be easily withered away. Earliest versions of Pegasus used phishing, but it was later able to use different exploits to sneak through. Usually it would use errors, or rather holes in image processing systems to its advantage to sneak through iMessage or SMS messaging or even WhatsApp. Most people with iPhones know that if you want something external which exists outside of what's curated for iOS and their proprietary system, you need to jailbreak your phone. This means you have to go into its code and disable the security systems that verify Apple licensing for all apps. People do this frequently to download apps that are usually only available elsewhere. Pegasus would go inside and jailbreak the phone for you so that it could secretly install more tools to spy on you. It was discovered by Ahmed Mansour, a human rights activist who had been arrested several times for speaking out against the regime of the UAE. In August of 2016, he received a link from an anonymous user claiming to have proof of torture happening in UAE prisons. Suspicious of this, he sent the link to the Citizen Lab at the University of Toronto. There, they worked in collaboration with Lookout. They reverse engineered the contents and found that it was from the NSO Group, which is a technology firm heavily tied with the State of Israel. Lookout alerted Apple of the vulnerabilities and they didn't hesitate. Apple patched it all up and closed those exploits off immediately, updating people's devices only days after this was discovered. On August 25th, they released iOS 9.3.5, closing the loopholes. The NSO Group claimed that the purpose of Pegasus was government surveillance. Israel gave all the same reasons that any other government gives to spy on its citizens, which is, we want to fight terror, we want to stop crime, etc. However, as you would expect, that's not how it was used. Thousands of politicians, journalists, activists, and lawyers were constantly being spied on. Leaks and court documents would reveal just how many people they were following. Many of these journalists weren't advocating for terror or anything like that. A lot of them were just basic human rights advocates. Leaks showed that they had about 50,000 targets of interest. Luckily, courts did not appreciate that. In October of 2019, Meta, who owns WhatsApp, sued the NSO Group. Meta won and was awarded $167 million plus an additional $440,000 in other damages. Though a judge would apparently reduce this down to $4 million, in November of 2021, Apple sued the Israeli cyber unit. Courts ruled against its methods of spying. The NSO Group had actually been trying to sell the Pegasus weapon to other governments. They had tried selling it to the DEA in the US, but they declined because it was too expensive. Maybe Hank Schrader would have caught Walt if the DEA had acquired it. The San Diego Police Department refused the offer for the same reason. In July of 2021, it was revealed that various politicians, activists, and UN diplomats in the US were being spied on. The NSO Group tried to claim that the US was not a target, but obviously that wasn't true. In January of 2022, it was revealed that the FBI had bought Pegasus back in 2019. Big shocker, I'm sure. In fact, many governments and agencies around the world had purchased this spyware tool secretly. Many currently still have it. In March of 2023, the man, the myth, the legend, Joe Biden signed an executive order preventing the government from illegally spying on citizens. He even went as far as to blacklist the NSO Group from contracting with any US agency. Oh, Joe, we were way too mean to this guy. So why would this be at the top of the list for scary computer viruses? From everything I said, this sounds all open and shut, right? Absolutely not. Cecilio Pineda Birto was a freelance journalist in Mexico who often talked about corruption and organized crime. He alleged collusions between police, local governments, and criminal organizations like the cartel. He had already survived an assassination attempt in 2015. However, he was shot dead in the city of Ciudad Altamirano on May 2nd, 2017. The attackers were never found. Stranger, his phone mysteriously disappeared from the crime scene. It was later revealed in 2021 through leaks that he was a prolific target of the Mexican government via Pegasus. Mexico was actually the first to buy this digital weapon and has remained its most active user. Alaa al-Sadiq was a political activist from the United Arab Emirates. In the early 2010s, there were civil movements across the Arabic region for democracy, peace, and freedom. She was a big part of that. In 2012, her father was arrested for advocating in such movements. After that, Alaa moved to Qatar, got a master's degree there in 2016, and then relocated to the United Kingdom. There, she served as the executive director for a human rights group, ALQST. The UAE tried to get her extradited. They called her a terrorist. Luckily, the UK protected her. They could only do that for so long. On June 19th, 2021, she died in a mysterious car crash. Many suspect there was foul play. After all, she was revealed to be a target of Pegasus, having its spyware on her devices. Jamal Ahmed Hamza Khashoggi was a Saudi journalist. He was very progressive and often critical of the Saudi government's attacks on free speech, women's rights, along with other human rights violations. Jamal moved to the United States in 2017 and worked for the Washington Post, but there were documents he needed back at home to get married here. On October 2nd, 2018, he entered the Saudi consulate of Istanbul. but never came back out. Inside, a group of 15 Saudi agents had strangled and dismembered him, even using a bone saw, and chemically disposed of his body. The CIA investigated, and they concluded that the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman had ordered the murder. He was a target of Pegasus. It's unclear whether or not he had the virus, but it was confirmed that his wife and colleagues and close friends did. Many others who died mysteriously had Pegasus on their device. While most courts have tried to crack down against its use, the virus is still out there. The NSO still tries to create new versions of it. The Russian government used a version of it as late as 2024. Thank you guys so much for tuning into my first ever video on this channel and actually making it this far. Please be sure to subscribe to see more horror, content revolving around oddities, and spooky video essays. Next week, we'll be going over the dark side of 2016. There's recently been a lot of buzz around that year, a lot of nostalgia in the air, so I'd like to peel back the layers and look at what's underneath.